Hello my friends. I haven't been around in like a month. I'm so sorry. I've been recording videos, but I just haven't been editing them. I'll explain why later in the video. But I wanted to come back with a review of a watercolor palette. This might be shocking to you if you know that I've kind of given up on watercolors for the past 2 years, but today's video kind of changes that a little bit. I'm reviewing Paul Rubens' new watercolor palette, the Youlan palette. I am very excited to talk about this palette with you. This watercolor palette is $49.99. There are 24 colors in this set, and this is Paul Rubens' 5th generation palette. So Youlan or Youlan, I don't know which one it is, means orchid born in a valley. This palette has a really beautiful tin and an amazing color story. I'm going to talk about it in a second. Don't mind my swatches. They're all over the place. I can't be helped. I'm a menace. I'm not an organized person at all, so the swatches are not consistent and beautiful the way that a lot of other people's are, but I definitely wanted to see what the colors looked like, and I also wanted to compare these colors to my other two Paul Rubens watercolor sets. I did a swatch comparison for all three of these. I have 2 videos on the other palettes, and I'll have all of the videos and the product links down in the description if you want to check those out. But up front, I'm going to say this has been my favorite palette that I've tried from Paul Rubens so far, followed by the Emerald palette, and lastly, I would say that their OG 24 pan palette is my least favorite so far from the 3 that I've tried. I have so many thoughts to share with you about this palette, but first let's talk about the sponsor of this video, which is Dossier. Dossier creates perfumes and fragrances inspired by extremely well-known, iconic, expensive fragrances for a fraction of the cost. These fragrances are so beautiful and spot on. I opt to wear them often over my other high-end perfumes because they're just that good. Dossier is such a great way to try a new fragrance or a scent and spend a fraction of the cost. If you're interested in Dossier, I will have a link down in the description for you to explore some of their perfumes. Thank you so much to them for sponsoring this video. This painting process is going to be a longer one, so buckle in and grab a snack or a nice little drink. I want to talk about how I felt about using this palette. Firstly, let me just preface by saying I kind of gave up on watercolors for the past 2 years. I haven't touched them, and I've just focused on pencil drawing and digital painting because I find it difficult to bounce between many different media, and I'm not great with watercolors, so I figured I could easily cut it out of my artistic work life. But I have loved both of my other Paul Rubens palettes, and when they reached out to me to see if I wanted to try this Youlan palette, I said yes because I was sure this was going to be a fun palette to experiment with. Paul Rubens sent me this watercolor palette. In exchange for an honest review of it, I am going to be telling you all of my real thoughts and feelings behind these paints, don't worry. Because I've just jumped back into watercolors and remember the frustrations that I've had in the past with paintings, I decided to switch up my painting strategy a little bit. With watercolors, for some reason, I always focus on painting big portraits of women, and I realized I don't love doing that. I always get frustrated, so let's switch some things around, and I figured I might try to paint this piece the same way that I sketch out my graphite sketchbook spreads. I've been loving curating a theme and a vibe for a sketchbook spread, and I figured this might be a great chance to explore that same subject matter but in color. And let me tell you, this palette is something else. I don't know very much about watercolors, so this is not going to be a very technical review of the pigments, but much more so of vibes, what my feeling is when I use this palette. The paper that I'm using is also Paul Rubens paper. It is 100% cotton rag with glitter in the paper, which is wild. 300 GSM, it's cold press, and it sells for this size $15.99 for 20 sheets. So a pretty good price considering the glitter and the cotton rag. I love this paper. In general, I opt for cold press paper, and I absolutely love the glitter in this paper. I think it's so magical and definitely fairy vibes, which is kind of what I was going with this piece that I'm painting. On the product listing, the palette claims to have more advanced colors by being a 5th generation palette. It claims to have vibrant colors and excellent solubility, so they dissolve quickly on contact with water, resulting in even and uniform colors. Fine color powder and ultra pure pigments, so they're ground extra fine. Lastly, it promises excellent diffusion and high transparency to these colors. In their own words, this watercolor palette has been upgraded from the original using quote-unquote advanced technology to achieve a better painting effect, finer grinding, better diffusion, and more intense color. The colors are also different from the previous 24 colors in their original palette. The very first selling point that I want to talk about is the color story of these 24 colors. I am such a fan of the choices for this palette. I am a big fan of pinks, deep blues, and indigos, and this set has so many beautiful pinks and reds and blues with less of a focus on warmer reds and a variety of browns. The color that I'm not very fond of in this set is the black specifically. I don't feel like the black is really intense and rich, but the other dark colors like the indigo are very intense, and so you can mix your own black, I feel like, very easily. The best way that I can describe my feeling towards these paints, the consistency and the color payoff, is almost like you're painting with inks. Even though the palette promises high transparency, I'm assuming you could achieve good transparency with specific colors. For me, I found that these are pretty opaque colors. If not opaque, they're so vibrant that they appear opaque. They spread really beautifully. The dry shift is not very crazy on most of these colors, which is a big thumbs up for me, and they quickly layer into very deep, dark colors. I'm such a fan of this type of watercolor. As somebody who's pretty dumb about different types of watercolors, this specific type of watercolor that's almost opaque in its richness and its smoothness and its color payoff, this is like my favorite type of paint to work with. These are artist grade paints made in China, even though this is a Chinese brand, which in the US might often be thought of as cheap price and cheap quality. This is a legacy brand. It is extremely high quality and maintains a standard of excellence. And for purchasing this in the US, the value of this palette is absolutely amazing. I would definitely recommend it to you. And if I painted with watercolors much more often, I would buy this for myself. I think the price is totally justified for how high quality these paints are. And I also want to mention that the tin that these paints come in is really beautiful, gold and pink or black depending on which palette you purchase. This tin case is great for travel. It's very portable, and I love that it has a bunch of mixing space when you open it up. Back to the paper for a second, I don't think that the cold press is very rough. If anything, I think it is maybe a bit smoother than the cold press paper I usually use. However, I think it's pretty much perfect for what I needed in this painting. Because I enjoy this paper so much, I'm kind of curious to try out their hot press paper. The paper does not warp greatly at all. I mean, when I'm painting, you can see that the paper is kind of lifted off of my desk, but there's no like internal warping in the different spots of this paper where I've been painting. It's like maybe one big warp, and it would not have warped if I had taped it down, but because of the way that I'm painting this, I wanted to be able to move the paper around, and so I didn't tape it down. The paper is also acid-free and pH neutral, so both these paints and the paper should be able to maintain some longevity and light fastness based on all of these specifications. Even though this is an artist grade palette, I think it's also great for beginners and for gifting. If you have an artist in your life that you would gift this to, or you are the artist and you are wanting it, send this palette to somebody who might buy it for you as a gift, because it would be such a great gift. It's packaged beautifully and it is such high quality. I have created so many paintings with this palette since I received it because I've really been enjoying the colors and the process for painting. It's just been so therapeutic. Figuring out a change in subject matter and style for my watercolor paintings is making me excited to think about watercolor painting again. I still have to consider that I'm taking time away from learning graphite and digital, but that being said, it feels like a luxury I'm indulging in right now, which is always exciting to feel, especially when it's your day-to-day job. It's so exciting to feel like I'm treating myself while creating art. So I've been having such a nice time exploring this palette and this paper and my sort of new style. At the end of this process, I used a white acrylic gouache to add some highlights and also mix with some of the colors, the watercolors, to create some tinted opaque highlights for this piece. I'm also so happy with the end result. Let me know what you think about it because I am super pumped. I have a couple other painting processes recorded. If you'd like to see those, I can also post those for you. But let's talk a little bit about why I have been gone for a month. It's really not a big deal. My brother came to visit me and hung out with me for a week last month, and I fell out of my routine of editing videos and posting videos and filming, and so I just have not been back into the routine of editing specifically. Something that always daunts me is recording my voiceovers because I trip over my words. I have to edit the actual voiceover pretty heavily, and it's always a pain to have to listen to your own voice for hours and hours and edit it. It's like nails on chalkboard almost. And so I have been recording the process of a lot of the pieces I've been creating. I just haven't gotten down to the editing of these pieces. I'm also not a routine-oriented person, so if I work really hard and find myself in a routine, I am very grateful for that. And if I fall out of that routine, it's hard for me to get back into it. The routine would be editing and posting twice a week on YouTube, which when I was in the routine was super exciting. So I'm hoping to get back into it because I have so much content. I missed you guys, I missed talking to you and creating artwork to share with you. I hope you enjoy this painting and maybe my thoughts. Lastly, I feel like, do I have to end this with any kind of negatives I feel about this palette? I feel like I need to say something bad about it so that this positive review feels believable, because all I've been doing is gushing about these paints, but truthfully there's not much that I would change. At the beginning of this video, there were a couple of colors that I pointed out that were not maybe my favorite in this set, which would be primarily the black in this set. I was not a huge fan when it comes to it, and the browns are not anything like insanely amazing. However, it's very easy to mix your own browns, especially when it comes to having such beautiful, vibrant colors to mix with. So it's not something that I'm necessarily upset about. In this painting process, you can see I did achieve deep, dark colors, solid blacks, and very pigmented strokes. So the fact that the black is kind of a miss is really not that big of a deal for me, especially since the indigo color is so deep and rich. You might as well just use the indigo instead of the black. If you're interested in checking out this palette, I will have a link down in the description. I appreciate you being here and listening to me talk about this palette and about my painting process a little bit. Let me know if you're interested in purchasing this palette for yourself or if you've been eyeing it. And feel free to subscribe and turn on post notifications if you'd like to see more videos from me and be notified whenever I post a new video. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. Bye.